Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D animator, illustrator, designer, and your pal, and I'm excited to have you back again this week. Glad to say that we'll be making some monster characters today. This is the type of stuff I like to make, and this is a good opportunity to continue on that process. What's up, Matasung? I'm saying your name correctly. Thanks for tuning in. Hello. Some early guests. Dig it. What's going on, you guys? So I don't have a super clear idea of what I'm going to make today. I don't have any reference imagery or any sketches prepped, but I do have sort of this vague notion in my mind of the type of thing I want to make. So let's see if we can't make that happen. And that idea is basically just this overall like full bleed kind of composition with all kinds of wacky characters sort of floating in and out. Just making this sort of overall full bleed texture pattern sort of deal. Let's see. I'm doing good. So I think these characters are all going to be fairly simple, comprised of, not too many disparate elements, but I think the charm will be that there's a whole bunch of them and that they're arranged in a nice way. I really like that sort of method of working or of composing and creating pieces and that, I'm not like a super high poly, tons of detail kind of guy a lot of the time. I think people prefer to create rich scenes, but they're only rich because of the arrangement of the simple pieces and the way everything works together. We'll see, though. We'll test that theory. Let's see how it goes today. First, I'm going to set up like one or two of these characters and kind of arrange them around the space. And then after that, I think what I'll do is just kind of copy and paste them around and get like a range of variations on these guys. Then when we have that variation in place, we can, push and pull and add and subtract and further differentiate them from one another until we've got a group that feels cohesive, has enough variation amongst the components, and then have them arranged in a really nice way. So, let's do it. Throwing a camera in the scene. Whoops. What's up, Kostya? Welcome back again. Love seeing repeat guests. Appreciate you tuning in. And see, this is what I'm talking about now. I had sort of that basic setup for the character, but now I'm creating variation, sort of riffing on it. Oops. Just working on a wiggly mouth. It can be sort of tough to pull off. Let's see what we got That's a little better actually this way. Let's crank this dude up. Crank it up. All right, let's start. It's good enough for now. A wobbly mouth. Now I'm jumping over into the sculpting palette. It's another thing I can do to help add variation and bring some life to these guys is to sort of sculpt and push and pull these primitive shapes. I do love starting with a primitive. You can get a lot of work done with primitives if you know how to use them. But it's nice to sort of break up those simple shapes sometimes. I think it'll be a fun thing to do a bit later is to go through and just, you know, break everything up just a little bit. Oops. What's up, Nathan? I'm just going to be, this week I'm going to be making a whole bunch of these monsters, and I'm going to be just arranging them into a cool illustration. Something that's like a full bleed pattern kind of deal. And I'm going to actually, I think, have some fun pushing and pulling the limbs around and making it, I don't know, using the limbs and their funny shapes around to try and drive sort of the composition of the illustration. It's like this full bleed pattern almost, but made all of monsters. Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it. Thanks for checking me out on Insta. I've been pretty busy the last week or two, so I have not, unfortunately, had the chance to update Instagram as much as I typically like to. That happens. It's been pretty busy. I have to say, I moved into a new town and I started really, working on like new business development, reaching out to local agencies and studios, and I'm glad to say that some of it came through finally, which is what you want. But the bummer is that I wound up working all weekend because some of those projects came through, and one of them was this really kind of fast turnaround visual development project, which is cool. I'm glad for the opportunity. It's really good contact, really kind of a cool project in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, it was, like I mentioned, very quick turn, and there was a bunch to do, so, be careful what you wish for. It might turn out to be a weekend's worth of work. That's all right. So, in a perfect world, ideally what I like to do is, a couple times a week add a new piece to Instagram. And if I don't have a bunch of client work going on, then I'm pretty much always making, personal work, stuff for myself. I hate when I do that. I just turn off the preview of soft selection instead of enabling soft selection, which is not what I wanted. Anyways. So yeah, so I typically like to update my Instagram and just stay busy and make lots of cool stuff, even if, someone's not paying me to do it at that given moment. But, the last few weeks, I've had a bunch of client work come in, and it's been harder to keep up with that personal work and keep my Instagram updated and all that. So you may have noticed, if you do follow me on Instagram, that I haven't been posting much the last few weeks. So now you know why. You got to keep the schedule busy. That's at least what I think, in terms of keeping my work fresh and staying productive and, staying with reasonably good habits. You got to keep after it even if someone isn't there paying, right? And the illustrators whose work you really admire, and this probably goes beyond just illustrators, probably, goes to many different types of professionals and athletes and actors and all sorts of creative people. But, when the client work comes around, when a potential paying customer reaches out, you better be sort of ready. If you lay around playing video games and eating Doritos, staying up late, drinking beer, not doing what you're supposed to be doing, not, developing the discipline and learning to create consistently at a high quality level, then when those paying customers do come around, you're not going to be ready for them. You're going to be hungover. You're going to have orange Dorito stained fingers. And you're not going to be ready to crank out good work. So I treat every day like a working day, Saturdays included, even when I don't have like a weekend worth of work to do. I like to stay busy, stay productive, make personal projects for myself. And that keeps me, on my toes and in a productive mode. Whoops, I forgot to update these guys' lips. I'm blabbering away over here. What I should do. for competitions. Huh. Tell me more about that, Nathan. That's interesting. So I'm a big fan of podcasts, and some of what I was talking about a minute ago reminded me of something that Jocko Willink has said numerous times, both on his podcast and others. If you're into podcasts, I would definitely recommend listening to Jocko's. He's like a former Navy SEAL officer, high-ranking dude, but also a very interesting guy who's taught a lot about leadership and excellence, I guess, doing a good job, being accountable. He has a lot of interesting thoughts on topics like that. Start with this guy. So Jocko says something that's fascinating. Basically, what he says is that discipline equals freedom, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but like basically the way he breaks it down is if you want financial freedom, you give you a lot of money, you have to have financial discipline to get there. If you're not paying attention to your bank account or to your resources, if you're just spending like a dummy, and you have no discipline with your financial life, then it's going to be hard to get to financial freedom. The same thing is if you want freedom of movement around with your body, if you want to have, good mobility and feel great running around with your kids and walking in the park and being able to do the things you like to do, then you should have discipline with your physicality, with your body. And, the people who seem to move around great without any pain or seem to be, have incredible physiques, it's because of the discipline that they've put in that got them there, right? So, like, you work out all the time, get in great shape, and that offers you a certain level of freedom that isn't on offer to people who don't have that discipline, right? And I think that translates really well to the art world, particularly people who are freelancing and working for themselves. Essentially, this relates sort of to what I was talking about earlier before I got off on this Jocko tangent, but if you have the discipline to get up every morning and treat it like a working day, even though you don't have clients, even if your work isn't to the level where you're getting client work, you're not attracting the kind of work that you want to do. What's going on here? It's hard to talk in model sometimes. Basically, yeah, if you're let me start this over again. So yes, the discipline and freedom thing relates to an artistic career, as best I can tell. Essentially, if you want to have the freedom to, work for yourself, not have to show up to an office every day, then you definitely need the discipline to show up at work every morning and treat every day like it is a work day. You can't be laying around playing video games and drinking beer, like I was saying, because when the real work shows up, you're not going to be prepared for it. So you need a certain level of discipline, I believe, to unlock the freedom that comes with successful freelance art career. Not to say that I am necessarily a successful freelance artist. I'm working there. I'm making strides towards it, but I'm not where I want to be yet. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, discipline is can be a tough thing. I do think it's necessary, especially for artistic types. I think artistic types stereotypically are maybe a little less organized, a little more scatterbrained, a little bit more likely to sort of follow a whim. I think that's great if you know if you don't have any client work on, if you don't have any deadlines, then follow your whims, make some crazy stuff. You know, experiment, have some fun. But you should definitely stay after it. You should stay productive, and like I said, treat most days like they are working days, like you're accountable to someone. I mean, you should be accountable to yourself, right? And if you can develop those good habits, that discipline, then you'll get where you want to be. Or you'll get closer, at least. You might get where you want to be. There's no guarantee, but you're definitely not going to get where you want to be if you're not treating it like a job and taking it seriously. What's funny is I've been in situations in my career where, you know, I'll be on a marketing team or, you know, working for people who aren't artistic or artists themselves. And such a what a common expression is, oh my God, you're so talented. How do you do that? I could never do that, right? And all they're seeing is the one piece of art that you're making. At least speaking for me, like, you know, a decade or two into my career, like I graduated from college like 13 years ago or something like that, which is scary to say in and of itself. Um, and they weren't around, you know, for the hundreds of really bad designs that I've made, not to mention, you know, years of drawing and creating stuff in high school and college, and all they see is that one piece where they think they can say, oh, wow, you're so talented. But what they don't see is the years and years and hundreds of bad pieces that you've made leading up to that point. So um, it's another instance where people are like, oh, you know, you're so lucky to be able to be a designer. I wish I was talented and could be a designer. But really, there's a certain amount of discipline that leads you to be in those positions, that allows you to be in those positions. What are we dealing with here? It's funny, I'm waxing serious and poetic while I'm making a rather ridiculous image. Be disciplined, he says. Make wiggly monsters. It's very important. This is my show. I can ramble. Snoop's back. Snoop-a-loop. Yeah, out of 200 bad edits, I've uploaded 30 of them. Yep, that's about the percentage. And as you get better, as your experience increases, that ratio will also improve. You know, you'll get to 20%, 30%. But you got to allow yourself that process to really just create without too many expectations. I think maybe all these guys don't need to be super happy with me, so let's flip this dude up. Let's flip it up. It's a monster party, y'all. I keep going back to this guy and using him sort of as the template because he is the simplest. I think maybe you can sort of see what I'm getting at here with this illustration. I think we need to add a couple more of these guys, maybe 2 or 3 more of these guys, and just get the composition kind of set up. And then I'm going to go through and make all these arms and legs sort of intertwine and interact nicely, and go in and sculpt a few little details, and that'll be it. That'll be the exploration for today. Like I mentioned, I'm super busy, so it might not be a full 2 hours today. But I got to stay on the practice. It's somewhat important for me to keep up with this. Hope all of you guys get a little bit of something from it. Arrowhead man over here. How weird. This dude needs a third eye. For sure. Recognize, recognize. Whoops, come on, come on. Kind of frumpy dude. This guy have some tiny legs too? Perhaps. Small ones though on this guy, so I think we gotta fit another little fella underneath him. Not everybody needs legs though. That's what I always say. Guess I'll use this guy again as the sort of base model. Let's keep it happy, dude. You can be happy. I will allow it. A little bit derpy, but we like them that way. Very derpy. So what type of episodes would you like to see in the future? Everyone out there. I can't say that I'll definitely make it, but I would like to hear what's on your minds and get a sense for the kind of stuff you might like to see in the future. XD. I don't know what that means. Fox VFX, what's up? What's up, partner? It's feeling a bit long to me. Thanks, mate. Appreciate you checking in. Appreciate you subscribing. New videos every Tuesday. Like I always say, this show is an unrehearsed look into my workflow. So these aren't tutorials, perhaps, or you know, they aren't necessarily tutorials, but you will probably learn something. Let's put it that way. Episode 158. It feels kind of insane to say that I've taken it that far. We've gotten 158 episodes deep. I should go long in this guy's arms. Whatever, screw it. So I think I've got mostly everybody in place. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just kind of tweaking their position and placement, just arranging them in a way that works. It's pleasing to the eye. That's all I want to do, guys. All I want to do is please your eyes. So it kind of looks like a bottle. I'm going to do like the position of his arms and legs are working for me. It's working. Fine. I feel like I need a little shape to kind of fill in some of these gaps here. They're not quite big enough for individual monsters themselves. But I think we do want some kind of simple bubbly geometry in there. And what I like to do is actually literally think about things pointing into the composition. Using these almost like little arrows. Use that to lead people's eye around. Triangles are always such a dynamic shape. At least I think so. Do I sound like a total dork for saying things like dynamic shape? Probably. Do I care? Probably not. This is what I meant earlier in the episode when I was talking about kind of setting up like a pattern. It's not really like a repeating pattern. You think about sort of an even application all around the composition. That's kind of what I had in mind. Fun. Getting someplace. I'm trying to think how I want to light this. I'm going to start with just a simple sky object. I'm going to make a very simple like HDRI for myself. It's not really an HDRI, it's just kind of an image-based light, gradient-based light in this case. Add a little bit of color in there, just to make it more interesting. And of course, we have to turn GI on for it to even do anything. So let's just throw on GI. Turn the settings down a little bit just so it's faster for you guys. Put a little AO on there as well. Fun. Doing stuff. The lighting's still a bit flat, given that we only had sort of that global fill light. I want to add a little bit more dynamism and some shadows to it by adding this spotlight here. I think what I can do is make a slightly more severe angle, so we get a little bit more of a cast shadow. Right. And we'll probably run into things where these triangles and monsters are casting shadows on one another, which may or may not be a good or bad thing. I think actually so far it's working out pretty well. Little bits like this and this actually are pretty nice. Now, I'm not sure I love that shadow necessarily, but what we can do is slide that back up a little bit so it occupies the same part of the composition. Maybe doesn't cast quite such a large shadow on our boy here. Your boy. These guys are all your pals. This guy, I'm still not loving the shape of his body. People said that to me before too. It's very rude. No, but I'm gonna try something new here. Not sure what it is. Start with a cube and just kind of beat it up. Of course. Of course. Maybe something like that's better. It's simple. Part of the problem is the last one's a little too tricky. I like to add a little bit of reflectance to the eyes. It can give it a bit of personality, but I do think there was too much there. Tone that down a little bit. Up these subdivisions, smooth the boy out a little bit. What I also want to do at this point is go through and hit these guys with the sculpting tool a little, just to kind of break up these simple shapes a little bit. Before I do that, I'm actually gonna make a few too, just in case I wind up regretting any of these edits. Let's go sculpt. And so we've got our symmetry turned on, which is going to be useful for monsters. Some of these guys that are fairly low poly will probably need to be subdivided. The sculpt tool can really reveal some of those jagged edges. This guy who has a wiggly mouth, maybe I just want to keep him smooth. Nah, I don't know. We'll see. We might come back to him. A lot of these guys that are super low poly and get their smoothness from a subdivision surface, I'm just changing them into an editable object before I start pulling on them, because there aren't enough subdivisions to really effectively change anything. I may need to even subdivide them again to get a smooth result. I'm just going to go ahead and do that on this guy. You can see it does bring a lot of character to these guys to get outside of that strict primitive shape and just sculpt a little bit here. Oops. Tool. Let's see what we got here. You see there's subdivision options right in this sculpting panel itself. And those are like, that adds this, now it's hard to see under the chat here, but what you can see is that this little icon, that's like your sculpt tag, which adds subdivisions. It's kind of like a hypernerve in that it doesn't actually subdivide. It creates like a non-destructive subdivision, but also kind of freezes the geometry. You have to sort of expand the geometry to get like an editable version of what you've sculpted. I think I'm definitely looking too low poly. Too rough. On this guy, since I rotated him 90 degrees, you can see our symmetry is not set up accurately. So I'm going to have to go to symmetry. Like, see? Yep. And this guy, I really like his long, kind of linear look. So I'm not going to break him up too much. Kind of around the mouth and eyes here. Let's do another test rendering. I'm not sure if I'm loving the color palette at this point. Now that pattern might be a bit too much. I like this darker background though. I think I do like that kind of minty color for the monsters. It's definitely too small. Let's see how it looks when we get a little bigger with it. Man, that that really reminds me of the texture from those like composition notebooks. Black and white. I think we call them composition notebook. That lined paper. Let me try one other thought in terms of changing up the color. I'm going to pay for it with rendering time though. I guess with how lively this image is, it kind of feels like a party, so maybe we should lean into that a little bit. Do some party lighting. Party lighting. I'm really just experimenting on the fly here, so y'all are seeing this come together at the same time I am. There's something to that, I think. There's something fun about that, though. What do you guys think? I think it's just a bit much. Let's try this one out. Got this thought that since there's all this additional color added with the lighting, maybe it makes sense to go kind of gray and monochromatic with some of these textural elements, or some of these background elements, so that they can catch the light and take on all those crazy colors. Right there you see what happens when you've got that sculpting tag on there. I'm trying to scale the whole thing down, but the object with the sculpting tag applied won't scale down. So what I'm going to do is just force it down using the scale parameters inside PSR. Just force it. And that's an interesting notion. I just think it needs to be pushed further. Yeah, I think getting rid of that texture in the background is the right move, as well as increasing the contrast. I'm going to bring a little bit more of that color back into these foreground dudes. Maybe make them a little brighter. These interesting shadows and kind of reflections look pretty good. Feeling that. So I'm just going to go a little darker on the background stuff, a little lighter on these foreground guys. I'm really getting pretty close to where we want to be. It's a monster party, y'all. Yeah, getting there. I could spend all day just going through finessing the placement of this stuff and adding little details and just really tweaking the composition and improving it incrementally. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm up against some other tasks and deadlines. There's actually some nice gradation in this background here, all due to those lights we added in. Possibly our last test rendering here. Darkened up the eyes a bit, which I think is working. Turned down the reflections a little on those. Scaled the lights up, so we're going to get a little bit more distance. And I also turned the gamma up so that our midtones are a little stronger and the light travels a little bit further inside the model. I liked a lot of the transitions I made on that last round of edits, but I do think that what I want to do is turn that gamma back down under global illumination. In fact, I turned it down lower than 1 because I think the middle tones were getting a little bit too bright and washed out. I think part of what's working so nicely is these fun, colorful highlights and all the different lights that we've added. And you can see that some of those get sort of washed out in between these two renderings. So I went back down, you see I'm getting a little bit more contrast, which is working better for me. All right, let's crank open Photoshop. Make, I gotta tell you, of all these characters, the one I like the least is the one that's right in the middle, which is a bit frustrating. I'm gonna make a little adjustment here. I was about to say that's our final rendering, but you know what? I don't want to live with that guy. I'm just not loving him that much. It's a little better already. Now the question is going to be, am I making them worse or better? Let's find out. better. That's a bit better. Glad I took a moment to try and sort that out. Plus that allows us to get more of this wiggly arm in here, which is fun. Like I said earlier, I could spend all day here tweaking these limb positions and just trying to get everything like perfectly arranged. There is a point of diminishing returns though, and since I've got other stuff I need to get to today, I'm gonna have to call it soon, unfortunately. It's alright. That's why the show's called The Practice. It's about, it's about showing up and doing your work. It's like a meditation or a yoga practice. It's not going to be perfect every time, but the most important thing is just showing up to do the work, showing up to give it a shot, give it your best shot, because how's that for big talk? One last little tweak here. We'll check out our last test rendering to see if we're cool with what we wound up with in terms of lighting. I think we are. Let's crank out this final rendering. Yeah, I like that little duck sort of mouth, kind of a ducky mouth. A little bit like a bill, which is a good thing for a monster to have. Like his position's a little better, his arm's a little better, so I'm glad we came in and tweaked that guy one last time before moving into the final. He's got a little more personality, and I'm pleased with how it turned out. Or more pleased. This guy's really funny down here. I like that big open mouth. Very cool. This guy's pretty cool too. He's got pretty dynamic leg and arm placement. I like the way this guy's kind of jumping in from the top and looking down. This guy's mouth and really wide head are pretty funny. I think, there's really some cute, interesting little characters in here. A lot of potential. A lot of fun. As soon as this is done in about a minute or so, I'm going to drop it into Photoshop and just bump up to the saturation and adjust the colors of hair and call it a final piece. This guy's a little bit rough, just in terms of the smoothness around his head. If I were running up into time constraints, I would definitely smooth that out, add a subdivision surface or whatever. This is not even the physical renderer. This is just the standard renderer, my dude. Faither3. How you doing? Thanks for tuning in towards the end here. Just kicking out a final rendering. Retouch it in Photoshop quickly. One thing that would help a bit is just cleaning up with the spot healing brush some of those weird overlaps. I mean, I could even go through and smooth some of this out in Photoshop if I really wanted to. Overlapping splines can sometimes give a bit of strangeness here. That you could fix in the model if you need it to be perfect, or it's fairly easy to just go through and spot heal in Photoshop afterwards if it doesn't need to be a perfect model. So let's bump the saturation a bit, get a little bit darker. Also like to come up into the curves here. Add some blue shadows. It would also be nice to duplicate that. Add a bit of noise. I like noise. I haven't done this in a while. Some of my images I'll just add a bit of noise overall. It's a bit much, but it's a separate layer, so what I can do is just turn it down a bit. Even pull it out of the highlights. So it's only in the shadows. Some of these areas are getting a little bit blown out as I'm adjusting this contrast. Particularly this area. Be kind of careful there. All right. So there you have it, gang. Pretty fun little piece. Turn that graininess down just a hair. I do like it though. Embracing the fuzzy, grainy, digital nature of this image. Wonder how visible that is over the live stream. But in any case, here we have it. Some fun little characters. I didn't have a really strict idea of what I was going to make when I started today, but had sort of this in mind, roughly speaking. Has its merits. A lot of times I say, I sort of issue these caveats at the end of the episode where I say, it's not as good as a final piece could be, and I think that's true for this. There's a lot of details that could have been pushed further. Like you could imagine almost sort of zooming out from this image and adding, 2 times as many monsters and getting a really rich, detailed array of these characters here. It was a really fun exploration. I think I learned a little bit, pushed the boundaries a little bit. Had fun experimenting with this lighting setup, which is really different from the stuff I typically use. So yeah, it was a fun practice, and I appreciate everyone tuning in. Hopefully y'all took a little bit of something from my rambling and doodling here in cinema. Talked a little bit about discipline and how that might relate to freedom. Definitely go check out Jocko Willink. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to say on the matter. And in the meantime, if you want to keep up with me and the work that I'm doing, hit me up at DLGNCE on Instagram and the other social medias. My website is diligence.studio, where you can see my full body of work and get in touch. If you liked what you saw, give us a subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and comment down below if you have any further questions or ideas for future episodes of the podcast. And until next week, this is Stuart saying goodbye. See you later.